All right. Well, a few weeks ago, we started a series on the book of Nehemiah, if you recall. And if you remember, he was the cupbearer to the king of Persia. And one day, he received a report from his brother on how terrible the conditions were in Jerusalem. And so he realized that in the 140 years since Jerusalem had been destroyed, nothing had really been done to repair the city itself. Now, Ezra the scribe and a few others had gone back, and a few years before that, the temple was serviceable. They had done just enough to make it serviceable, but the city of Jerusalem was barely even inhabited. The walls were broken down, the people were downcast, and it was hard for them to even imagine themselves capable of pulling off any kind of restoration project. They just didn't have the manpower. It seemed impossible for them to accomplish anything. But when Nehemiah heard about their conditions, he knew he had to do something. He knew it could be done and it should be done. And God placed it on Nehemiah's heart to be the one who was the mover and shaker in the situation. Nehemiah, as cupbearer to the king, was almost like second in command. He had some good administrative skills, and he was high up in the government. But he wasn't going to send someone else to go restore Jerusalem. He said, I'm willing to go myself. And so what we see is in our chapter today, Nehemiah 2, how is he going to carry out this task? That's the question. God called him to do it. How was he going to actually get it done? So we're going to read through Nehemiah 2 today as our text. And I'm using the Amplified version. We're only going to read through verse 18. But if you'll just listen to the word of the Lord. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was placed before him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. Now, I had never been sad in his presence. So the king said to me, why do you look sad when you're not sick? This is nothing but sadness of your heart. Then I was very frightened, and I said to the king, let the king live forever. Why should my face not be sad when the city, the place of my father's tombs, lies desolate and its gates have been consumed by fire? The king said to me, what do you request? So I prayed to the God of heaven, and I said to the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your presence, I ask you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's tombs, so I may rebuild it. The king, beside whom the queen was sitting, asked me, how long is your journey going to take? When are you going to return? So it pleased the king to send me, and I gave him a definite time for my return. Then I said to the king, if it pleases the king, let letters be given to me for the governors of the provinces beyond the Euphrates River, so they will allow me to pass through until I reach Judah. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, so he will give me timber to construct beams for the gates of the fortress, which is by the temple, and for the city wall, and for the house which I will occupy. And the king granted me what I asked, for the good hand of my God was upon me. And then I came to the governors of the provinces beyond the Euphrates River and gave them the king's letters. And now the king had sent officers of the army and even horsemen with me. Now when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard this, it caused them great displeasure that someone had come to see about the welfare and prosperity of the Israelites. But anyway, I came to Jerusalem and was there for 3 days. Then I got up in the night, I and a few men with me. I didn't tell anyone what my God was putting in my heart to do for Jerusalem. And there was no animal with me except the one on which I was riding, so as not to attract attention. So I went out at night by the valley gate toward the Dragon's Well and to the refuse gate and inspected the walls of Jerusalem, which were broken down, and its gates, which were consumed by fire. Then I passed over to the fountain gate and to the king's pool, but there wasn't even a place for the animal I was riding to pass. So I went up at night by the ravine of Kidron and inspected the wall, and I turned back and entered the city by the valley gate and returned. The officials didn't even know where I had gone or what I had done, nor had I yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, or any of the rest who did the work. But then I said to them, you see the bad situation we are in, how Jerusalem is desolate and lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem so we will no longer be a disgrace. Then I told them how the hand of my God had been favorable to me, and also about the words the king had spoken to me. And they said, let us rise up and build. So they thoroughly supported the good work. Okay, so now let's go back. Nehemiah had his brother come to him in the late fall. We're talking about Thanksgiving time on our calendar. And so that's when he found out about what was going on in Jerusalem. But when we read our text today, it said he approached the king in the month of Nisan. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't really keep track of the Jewish calendar so much, so I'm not sure when that is. But when you look it up, it's late March, early April, around the time of Easter. So what has Nehemiah been doing this whole time? Between the time that his brother brought him the information and the time he went before the king? Well, I think it's pretty obvious when you go back and look at it. But Nehemiah approached the king. Now, back then, if you were in the service of the king, you were supposed to be happy about it. Okay? You were supposed to be happy you had a good job with the king, especially in such a high position. And so the day that we encountered this passage, Nehemiah has come before the king months after this first report of his brother. And he finally is going to address the king and let him know what's going on. I know a few people here at church have such expressive faces, it would be really hard for y'all to keep a secret for that long, but Nehemiah did. So he schooled his face until the day came that he needed to make his plea before the king. And then he let it be known by the expression on his face something was wrong. And it's interesting because what did the king do? The king asked what was wrong. Nehemiah didn't say, hey, I got a problem. I need you to talk to you about it. He was trying to get the king to be curious about what was going on with Nehemiah. And then when the king asked him what was wrong, he said, actually, my place where my father's tombs are is in ruins. Now, back in the day, were you supposed to take care of the tombs in the cemeteries of your ancestors? Absolutely. Even the Persian king did that. So he was appealing to the king on the basis of what the king would understand. And finally, Nehemiah came down to it. He said, how long are you going to be gone? What do you need? Nehemiah prayed to God before he answered. But he had a whole list of things ready to go. So there are four main things Nehemiah asked for. He said, one, send me to Judah. Let me go to Judah. Not somebody else, not a group of workers. Who wants to go to Judah? I want to go to Judah. I'm your second-hand man, but I need to go. Then he told the king exactly how long he expected to be gone. So that's number two. He already had a plan. Now, was it easy to travel back in the day? It took a little while to even get there. But he knew already exactly how long he anticipated this building project was going to take, the travel time was going to take. He had it all laid out, didn't he? He already had an answer for the king. And then number three, he asked for letters to carry with him. So all the other governors that he was passing through the land would say, oh yeah, he's on king's orders. He's fine. Just let him on through. Right? So he asked for letters. And then he also asked for a letter to the keeper of the forest for supplies of wood. So he had a list of all these things that he asked the king for. So what does this tell us about Nehemiah? He had been counting the cost of the project he was undertaking. This was not an impulsive decision that he came to the king about. This was something he had carefully considered and orchestrated. He had spent these months going through the details. If he was like me, there was a spreadsheet involved, right? Now, he had already considered the possibility there might be problems with trying to transport all of these people and things through all these different areas. He knew exactly the type of supplies he needed. He knew how long it was going to take. And so when the king asked him, well, what do you need? Was there any stammering and going, just give me a few minutes. I got to go do some research. No, Nehemiah already had it laid out, didn't he? Now, it's Father's Day. And so initially when I was thinking I should shift gears and do something different than this passage for the day, but as I read and studied, it became apparent to me most of the men here would understand this concept of counting the cost before you start a project. Okay? Many of our gentlemen here are blue collar, and part of your job at times may be doing a quote or a bid for work. I know some of you in the congregation do that. And so you have to count the cost of supplies and manpower and how long it's going to take and the hours. All of that has to be added up before you start a project. Why? Because if you don't add it up correctly or within a ballpark, are you going to lose money in the end? Yeah. Or can you even necessarily complete the project if you don't have the manpower to pull it off? Right? I know Rob Calvert, he does quotes for bids for big companies all the time. That's what he does. And that you have to pull all the numbers, all the supplies, all the costs that this is going to take before I start an endeavor. Did you know that Jesus preached on this same thing? Did y'all know that? Counting your cost before you start a project. He says in Luke 24, a large crowd was following Jesus, and he turned around and said to them, if you want to be my disciple, you must by comparison hate everyone else. Your father, your mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters. Yes, even your own life. Otherwise you cannot be my disciple. And if you do not carry your own cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. But don't begin until you count the cost. For who would begin construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there's enough money to finish it? Otherwise, you might only complete the foundation before running out of money, and everyone would laugh at you. Or they would say, there's the person who started that building and couldn't even afford to finish it. So we are living in a day and age where very few people like to actually count the cost. They want the experience of hearing God, but they don't want to put down their sin. They want the forgiveness of Jesus, but they don't want to forgive others. They want to be part of a church family, but they don't ever want anything to go wrong in the church. Okay? Sometimes you want to run around and love who they love, but they don't want to count the cost of heartbreak or STDs or any of the other things that might come with those consequences. They want all the fun things they see their neighbors have and get to afford to buy, or the things on social media that look so nice. It's like, why can't I afford that? But they don't want to put in the work to earn the money to pay for it. God calls every single one of us to build something, to be a part of his kingdom, but it's going to cost all of us something to build it. For some of us, it means giving up things we like to indulge in. Sometimes I like to zone out and not be very productive. But in order to build what God has called me to build, do I have to give up some of my free time? Yes, I do. Sometimes it costs us to pour into other people. They're not easy to love. It's kind of hard sometimes. Sometimes it costs us our money and our generosity when we do what God calls us to do. Nehemiah had counted the cost of the project he was undertaking. He knew he was going to have to leave Persia. Second in command. Y'all know how long he ended up being gone? 12 years. And he gave the answer. When the king asked him, he gave the answer, apparently. He said, it's going to take me a while. I need to be gone. Do you think he was worried about his position being there when he wanted to come back? I would. I don't know how many jobs would hold your position for 12 years. He knew his position may not be waiting when he came back. And he knew it was probably going to cost him some of his own money to go down there and do what needed to be done. He did get a paycheck while he was there, but we're going to read later, he actually paid for a lot of things out of his own pocket. It was going to take some of his own sweat and blood. He could have asked someone else to go and help lead the project, be the project manager, send me a letter every month or so and let me know how it's going. But Nehemiah went on his own horse and he went around the wall. He was willing to help build it himself and not have other people do it for him. He had counted the cost and he was going to build what God called him to build anyway. Now, God calls us to build things for him. He places us and positions us to serve him. But some of us, whatever God has called us to build, we don't have a plan. We have not counted the cost, and we are flying by the seat of our pants. We do not know what it's really going to take sometimes to achieve what God has called us to do. So what do I mean by that? Some of us live without a budget. You don't know what's coming in every month. You don't know that you got 3 different Hulu subscriptions you're paying for. You don't know how much money you're giving every paycheck. And I know times are tough. I watch my grocery bill too. But it's hard to be able to have room to be generous if you don't even have a plan to be generous. Does that make sense? A few of you are fortunate enough to be married. And you are great at your jobs, but when it comes to your marriage, you're just winging it. Because there's no plan for date nights. There's no plan for a time to actually really talk about something other than the laundry and the yard needing to be cut. And there is a difference between being married and having those real conversations and living like roommates. Some of you have children that you wanted and you prayed for, but there is no actual plan for what you want them to know and the values you want them to have before they leave your home. And how do we expect children to be raised and leave our home if we don't have a plan for the things we actually want them to know and understand before they get out of our house? Now, I can go down a list of things I want them to know, but you know as well as I, it can be very easy to get so caught up in the busyness of doing life that it's been months before you've had a serious conversation with your child. That's how easy it is. It's easy to get caught up in thinking, we'll have that conversation about mistakes and about relationships, and I'll get to that, but they're so busy right now, and that's going to be a hard conversation. Or it's easy to think, well, one day we're going to have just the 2 of us. We're going to go out and have a girl's day or a guy's day, and that's when I'm really going to spend time with them. But some of you who have raised children, you know how quickly those years fly by, and then the opportunity is gone. Or possibly you treat your relationship with God the same way. There is no plan to develop it. There is no plan to spend time with Jesus every day. You might catch a cute meme on Facebook or a little TikTok or YouTube video and you say, oh, that's really nice. But y'all, snacking on stuff like that does not a relationship with God make. It is easy to say, well, I'll open my Bible. I'll read when life slows down. But y'all, if you don't have a plan to sit down and make a relationship with God the priority, just like with your children before you know it, it's been a year since you've cracked open the Bible and read anything. I know some of you excel at work. You have projects you tackle with surgical precision. You know what you're capable of, and the jobs get done, and you've got all the acclaim. But it's easy in the other areas of our life to set back and let time pass us by, and to just exist with no plan in place for the rest of what God has called us to. So our scripture today calls us to not be complacent, but be prepared to build what God has called us to do. If you're married, God has called you to be a good spouse, to respect and nurture that relationship. If you have children, God has called you to help form that child into a capable person to teach them about God. If you love God and you say you're saved, He has called you to also take up your cross and follow Him, to be a disciple, to live a life that shows it. If God has blessed you, He has called you to be a good steward of what He has given you, to take care of what you have if you want to be given more. If you are part of the body of the church, He has called you to help be the church and to take care of those who are here and in our community. It's hard to do that if you're not intentional about it, because it's easy for life to pass us by. We were having some conversations on the back end on ways that a person can be a blessing to our community, not just when the opportunity strikes, but in meaningful ways that, use the people we have and the abilities that we have. But it still is going to call people to sacrifice, to really do what God has called us to do. Now, Nehemiah, after he got permission from the king, he set out on his journey. He already had his plan. But when he got to Jerusalem, he didn't tell anybody for 3 days what he was up to. He had knowledge of what he thought was needed, but he went by night to check it out for himself. He didn't take anybody else's word for it. He inspected the walls of Jerusalem, and they were in such a state that in places his horse could not even pass through. Nehemiah had made his plans, but he was willing to evaluate and adjust his plans based on real-time information. So, I know at many of the companies Sawyer has worked for, they have a fab shop where they prefabricate pieces of pipe that are supposed to go to the job site and fit perfectly in place based on the plans that were drawn up. And sometimes that happens. And sometimes the pieces get to the job site and you say, that ain't gonna work. Y'all forgot about this whole other section. Like, what you saw on paper doesn't work in real life. They have to make real-time adjustments. And I'll tell you, I thought I had a plan for what motherhood was going to be like, because I was still working when Darcy was born. And I thought, I was just going to teach for 30 years, retire, it was going to be great. And God had other plans. And He set me at home for years. And then thought, all right, homeschooling, this is going to be where it's at. I've got the whole thing mapped out, K through 12. We got this. Well, God has changed plans. This next year, I'll have 2 kids in public school and 1 at home. And then the next year, we'll have all 3 in public school. My plans have had to shift and change to make it work. I still have the same goal, but how I achieve it looks different. So my goals as a mother are to raise children who know God, who understand that I am not perfect, but who still feel capable of turning to us for help, capable of achieving whatever God has called them to do, who are good people, who love other people no matter what they look like or their circumstances. My goals do not change, but the path to get there does. No matter what I want, I cannot achieve that without having a plan for it. A few years ago, we were traveling through, I think we were in Arkansas, is where we were traveling through. And we realized when we were shopping at a Walmart in Arkansas that Our Walmart here in Winchester is not as diverse as a lot of other Walmarts because our children were rather astounded at the diversity they were experiencing when they walked in. And it became apparent that it is our job to expose them to diversity and make sure they understand how to love people of all skin colors and backgrounds and ethnicities. But it's hard to do when they don't have any knowledge of that. So we've had some conversations about what that looks like. God has called us all to do something. Sometimes it's multiple things. Sometimes you are a parent, you're a spouse, you are a daughter, you are a friend, you are a co-worker, you are a member of a congregation, and God has called you to build in all those areas. But it is hard to do if we don't ever have intentions about how to do that well. Does anybody have a friend that they realize sometimes it's been months since they've actually talked to? Anybody ever? You do, Luke, I do. Sometimes it is easy to let our circumstances in life get us so caught up that we forget to build what God has called us to build. Now, Nehemiah, he was adjusting. He had a plan, but he went to Jerusalem and he adjusted his plan based on what he saw there. But through it all, Nehemiah kept God in it because he prayed and fasted before God to discern even what God was calling him to do. He made sure that that is what God had in mind for him. And then, when he went before the king, before he even responded to the king, in our text today it says he prayed to God before he responded to the king. He acknowledged God's hand in all of it. As he shared his plan with his fellow Jews in Jerusalem, he said, "This is not my plan. God has been working in this the whole time. And I cannot succeed if God's not in it." Proverbs tells us the heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. And commit your work to the Lord and your plans will be established. God has to be in whatever we are doing or else it will not be successful. Everyone in here is called to build something. You may be older and your working days and actual career are over. But God still has a purpose for you and has called you to do something. Ephesians 2:10 says, "For we are God's handiwork created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." He knew exactly the situations and circumstances we were going to find ourselves in. But my question for you today is, what is it God has called you to? What does he want you to build? And are you counting the cost? Do you have a plan for how to be what God wants you to be, or are you flying by the seat of your pants? Have you thought about what you want your marriage to look like and how to build time in for each other? Have you thought about the values and the knowledge you want your children to have? And how are you going to achieve that? Do you know when you want to have those big discussions? How to address drugs and bullying and sex? Do you have a time planned out to spend with God? Do you know what he even says in his word? How many days or months go by before you open your Bible? You cannot have a relationship without spending time with him. Now, you don't have to be legalistic about any of this. You can adapt and change course depending on the season of life you're in. There's a stream coming out. But you can adapt and change. There are seasons of our life when our kids are in one thing after another thing, and dinner on the table doesn't happen every night. But can we still spend time in prayer together as a family? Yeah. It just may look different. It may be at a different time than it did before. I'm willing to adapt and change. But the thing is, don't stop pressing forward. Don't give up on building what God's called you to build. Now, there's something else to consider. In our story of Nehemiah, if he had not stepped in to help them, was the wall probably going to be built anytime soon? No, it wasn't. Nothing was going to change. When it comes to our marriages and our children and our time with God, if we don't put in the effort, who will? If we don't have a plan in place to build our relationship with God, then what else is being built? If we don't spend time working on our marriages and building up our spouse, you're opening up the door to let somebody else build them up. That's dangerous. If you aren't having the conversations with your kids, who else is feeding them information? Who else are you letting have a say in their lives? If you aren't actively forming your children, I guarantee you someone or something else is. Did you know women tend to marry men a lot like their fathers? The type of man she ends up with often reflects the role model she had for a father. If her father was respectful to his wife and her mother, and if he refuses to speak bad of his wife in front of others, if he protects and provides, that's the type of man the daughter is likely to seek out, because that is her expectation of a healthy relationship. Conversely, if women grow up in a household that is combative and abusive, always arguing, never helping out around the house, her expectations often mirror what she saw growing up. And that's where we see families who end up in this endless cycle that just repeats itself. Boys also tend to resemble their fathers in a lot of ways. They learn many of the same characteristics. If their father speaks ill of women, they're likely to as well. If their fathers aren't responsible and don't own up to their mistakes, they're not likely to either. We are all building something whether we like it or not. But what is the quality going to be of what we build? Is it something we're going to be proud of looking back, that's strong and durable, or is it going to be something that is fragile and weak? We have wonderful people here in this congregation. I love all of you. But my challenge to you today is to consider what areas of your life has God called you to build in, and do you have a plan for what He wants you to build? Do you know where you're headed? Do you know how you're going to reach the goal, or are you just winging it? I want you to take time this week and consider in all the areas of your life, your career, your family, your home, your friends, church, where is God pushing you to build something? Take some time to put it on paper. What do you want out of your marriage? What do you want to accomplish in your children's lives before they leave home? Or in your grandchildren's lives? What do they want? You want them to remember about you and things you want them to carry with them as adults. What do you even want your co-workers to learn from you? Your church family to learn from you? Your friends? What areas are you gifted in that God can use for His glory? And folks, if you don't have a plan for spending time with God, then that's the first thing you need to do. Jesus said in Matthew 7:24, anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise, like a person who builds their house on solid rock. Though the rain comes in torrents and floodwaters rise and the winds beat against that house, it won't collapse because it's built on bedrock. But anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey it is foolish. They are like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rains and floods come and the winds beat against that house, it will collapse with a mighty crash. God has called you to build, and are you going to build well? And are you going to build something lasting? Something God has called you to? Or are you going to build something on sinking sand? So let's